that started, and I am coming to you from Lethbridge today, so I'm going to acknowledge the land from where I live, and I invite you to do the same as well. And I'll do that by sharing a video that that the city of Lethbridge has created. That does a really good job. So I will say Oki, and I will start with that. Sorry about this.
No worries. Ken, if you have a second too, Carrie isn't a co-host, so she can't share.
Oh, I'll get that fixed right now. Yes, okay. Okay, I'll try this again.
Okay.
Oki.
Oki.
Okay.
Oki.
Oki and welcome.
We acknowledge that we're gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains.
We pay respect to the Blackfoot peoples past,
present, and future.
We recognize the thousands of Indigenous peoples
from many diverse nations,
call Lethbridge home,
including members of the Blackfoot Confederacy,
the Six Gates of the
Akana,
Ikani,
Siksika,
Amskapi people,
as well as other First Nations,
Métis, and Inuit peoples.
We respect Indigenous people's cultural heritage,
beliefs,
truth,
and relationship to the land
that stretches back in time.
We will not blink at history.
we will not blink at history.
and we will learn from it.
Oki is an invitation.
A step forward.
In Blackfoot, Oki means hello.
Oki means hello.
Hello. Okay.
Oki.
Okay. Okay. And welcome to the lands of the Blackfoot people.
And with that, I will turn it over to our presenters today and let them get started. I will be checking in on the chat as best I can.
Carrie, make sure you unmute yourself too.
Got it. Ken, I think we may have, oh, my screen's distorted. We may have corrected the chat function. So
Okay.
I think most people should be able to share with everybody when they're selecting their chat.
So I get
And-
to everybody?
Yeah. I don't know. I got it.
Should be working.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Oh,
Okay.
good tech check.
Good.
Great tech check. Thank you.
Thanks for your patience, everybody.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, we'll get rolling. Hello and welcome. Thank you all for coming today. We know this is a particularly busy time, and we appreciate that you're sharing it with us. We want to just echo the land acknowledgement and pay our respects and gratitude to the First Peoples, the knowledge keepers, the youth, and the protectors of the landways, waterways, and airways today. So I always like to remind us that in this virtual space, it's the land beneath our feet that connects us all. And that feels like a really powerful way to open our learning today. My name is Carrie Murray. I work with Everactive Schools and I serve as the Director of Strategy and Innovation here. I have worked for Everactive Schools for almost 9 years. And before that, I worked for about 6 years for the Alberta Health Services, and I supported 4 school jurisdictions in Southeast Alberta. So my background is health promotion. School-based health promotion is what I've done for most of my career. And I'm really happy to be sharing time with you all today and my colleague, Adam.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Adam Pratt. I am a health and wellness consultant with Everactive Schools. It's a new role for me as of September. Prior to that, I was a teacher. Most of my time was taught as a physical education specialist at a K-8 school. I've also been a classroom generalist for a little bit in the middle years. And yeah, that was for about 7 years, and now just new into this role with Everactive Schools. So looking forward to talking about some cross-curricular teaching and learning today in regards to the new phys ed and wellness curriculum and all the other subjects that you're out teaching.
It might be helpful to frame the conversation today, knowing that a few of you are return customers, and we're really welcoming you to come back to the space. It'll be good review. We were asked to prepare some work for teachers who we know are working in the field and interested in looking across curriculum and using the frame of phys ed and wellness to do that, because that's our expertise in the end, is phys ed and wellness. So that's what Tuesday was about. Today is going to build on that. Some of the content is shared, certainly, but the frame that we were hoping to share the knowledge today in is around specialists or education or learning leaders. So those of you who may be working with other teachers in your settings to be supporting cross-curricular teaching and learning. Adam and I are really happy to accommodate and adjust on the fly. So if you need anything, please feel free to speak up. If we're sort of heading in the wrong direction, or you're really most interested in what applies to your own classroom and your own setting, we welcome that input. We want this to be as useful as possible to you. But we started down the path of supporting some knowledge, some sort of capacity building knowledge, train the trainer, so to speak. And that's where we'll head. Happy to adjust as needed. Thanks again, Ken, for that land acknowledgement. It takes me back to my time working in Southeast Alberta and Southwest Alberta with the Blackfoot people in Guyana. We're happy to bring this work to you today on behalf of the partnership between Alberta Regional Professional Development Consortia, Healthy Schools Lab, which is working out of the University of Alberta, and Everactive Schools. So that's where Adam and I are from, and we'll present to you today. Our work is as a newly registered charity, but we do have a 21-year history of supporting healthy school communities in Alberta. We used to be under the Alberta Teachers Association, and so for a long time we've been a go-to organization for resources and professional learning related to the implementation of phys ed and health and the curriculum that has passed between there, which Adam's going to tell us a little bit more about. This is what we're hoping to talk about today in the session. So we're going to review the philosophy and structure of the new phys ed and wellness curriculum. We'll discuss entry points to integrating phys ed and wellness in other subject areas. And a good reminder from that we were made aware of last time, it's important to specify that today we're going to use the draft curricula that's published on the new Learn Alberta website. So we are looking at the draft curricula for all subject areas that have not yet been implemented, just because the creation of that cross-curricular content is really easily done in that way. So you'll see that a little bit later. And then finally, we want to explore some practical applications. And hoping there's time, we're going to pull back the curtain and show you how we put our heads together to come up with some ideas that we'll also talk about. Before we do that, we are going to use our newly enabled chat function, and this is called a wellness waterfall. One of the key features or foundations of this new phys ed and wellness curriculum is that it's multidimensional in its approach to well-being. That's important because it means there's lots of entry points for any teacher anywhere to relate to wellness or well-being. So just to demonstrate that, I want you to reflect for a second on what you do to support your own wellness. And I want you to type it out in the chat without hitting send. So we're going to count it down together. And when we hit send, it will create a waterfall effect in the chat. It'll go really quickly, and you'll be able to just hear from other people around the province about how they take care of their own wellness. So type it in the chat, but don't yet hit enter. I'll give you another 7 seconds or so. And in 3, 2, 1, enter. Oh, that's great. Travel, some cross-country skiing or biking, resting, reading, yes. Reading and travel, night walks with young people. So there's some social and physical wellness in there. Resting, reading, that's intellectual well-being. Travel, of course, the same, some cultural well-being in there. Yeah, so really nice to start us off by reinforcing that wellness is approachable from many different angles. And it's nice to be able to relate to that for your own well-being and how you take care of yourself.
All right. So we are going to quickly jump into the new curriculum, and Marilyn and Jocelyn, again, this might be a bit of a review for you, but I often ask people before we start this, if you feel like you're it's called a seed, sprout, or a tree. So if you feel like you're a seed, like this new curriculum, you know very little about it, you've maybe looked at it once or twice, but pretty surface level stuff, still learning about it quite a lot, you'd be a seed. If you're feeling like you're a sprout, someone who would be, you know, you've done a little bit of work on the curriculum, you've maybe looked at it multiple times, you've had a little bit of release time perhaps to look into it and start implementing it, you'd be a sprout. If you're a tree, that's like you've dove deep into this curriculum and you're really, really into it. To be completely honest, for me and the new role I'm in, I know this new curriculum better than I knew the one I taught for 7 years, which might not sound great, but I've actually had a lot more time to look into it in my new role. So if you could just tell us if you are a seed, sprout, or tree, that would be awesome. Marilyn and Jocelyn have played this game before, so they are quick to respond, which is good. I'm seeing lots of sprout action, seed, sprout. So it's similar to on Tuesday when we did this, we're kind of in the seed or sprout area, which is about right. Hopefully your divisions have provided you a little bit of time to look into this. I know some have, but some haven't. So we're going to try and give you a bit of background context on the curriculum again. So this will be the same as in our session on Tuesday. But if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to let us know. So one thing to note, just the timeline of the curriculum in 2000 was when the physical education curriculum was last updated. Health and life skills and career and life management were released in 2002. Prior to that, both curriculums were redone, I think, in the 80s. And then in 2014, there was intention for a new curriculum. And after a lot of back and forth, we ended up here where we're at in 2022 with the rollout of a new curriculum in some areas, not all areas. So as you know, K-3 English language arts and K-3 math, and as well as K-6 phys ed and wellness, with intention for in 2024 for this to roll out on a grander scale. Biggest thing we like to point out in this one is just that health and physical education, which were former subjects, are now merged into one subject, which is important. We'll talk about the importance of that as we go on. Also, change can provide some challenges as well. So our next slide, we just want to highlight a little bit of the philosophy of the curriculum. So again, the merger of these shows that this is a bit more of like a holistic look at health and wellness. So we're still focusing on developing an active lifestyle and fundamental movement skills and joy and activity. And we still want students to learn how to understand themselves and their communities and relationships better. But we're now looking a bit more at how those are interconnected and kind of inseparable concepts. They feed into each other, and wellness is much more than like a physical and other parts of wellness, much more interconnection. So a more holistic look at this curriculum. On that same note, at Everactive Schools, on their next slide, Carrie, we like to kind of consider things. We always use what's called the comprehensive school health framework. So that addresses, you can see a little diagram of it in the top left there. It's like a whole school community approach where we're looking at policies that affect schools. We're looking at the teaching and learning that happens within a school. We're looking at partnerships and services that a school has with organizations like Alberta Health Services or Everactive Schools. And then we're looking at like the actual environment, both physical and social, of the school to consider how that impacts the school. And this newer curriculum with this more holistic approach, I think lends even better to this whole school comprehensive school health approach. It also does a pretty good job, or I would argue a better job, of just identifying student diversity and First Nation, Métis, and Inuit and Francophone perspectives as a priority in Canadian culture, and talks about a lot about how this concept of holistic wellness is actually rooted in a lot of Indigenous cultures where physical wellness isn't separated from spiritual wellness. They're actually considered to impact each other and kind of interwoven together. So lots of cool takeaways from the new philosophy behind this curriculum, we would argue. Now, one thing we wanted to highlight is with this new holistic approach, what you see on your screen here is the 8 organizing ideas of the phys ed and wellness curriculum. These 8 organizing ideas are consistent across K to 6. And we showed this web again, just to reinforce that holistic concept of how, as most of you know, when you don't have healthy relationships, often that impacts things like your active living, or if you are struggling with character development, that's going to impact your healthy relationships, or it could impact your safety because of some decisions you make related to health or substance use and these kinds of things. Financial literacy is going to impact your access to things like recreation. So that might impact your active living. We just really want to reinforce, again, the holistic approach of this curriculum, and to really reinforce that it's not really a linear curriculum. It's not like a checkbox where you do one objective and never revisit it. Really, you'll be revisiting and talking about a lot of these all year, and in a cross-curricular context, which we'll talk a lot about today. The framework of the new curriculum is something we wanted to highlight. Now, one thing that's really cool about this new rollout of the curriculum, again, another big positive, is it's consistent. The framework is consistent across subject areas. So whether you're looking at, English language arts, math, or physical education wellness right now, this framework is the same. So it makes it a little bit easier to read, especially if you're a generalist teacher teaching multiple subjects. I know when I was a generalist, I found that very difficult because you had to learn how to read each curricular document. And while this might be different from curriculums you've read before, which takes some work to understand how it's laid out and wrap your head around it, at least it's consistent across subjects. So once you kind of figure out the structure, it should help you out quite a bit. So we're going to dive into each of these areas a little bit more and give a brief kind of introduction to them. So
I was just going to add that that consistency across subject areas also makes cross-curricular teaching and learning more possible than ever. So it is easier to plan and spot ideas across subject areas.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great point. It's a lot easier to view, like as someone who taught phys ed and wanted to implement like numeracy concepts. Often I just didn't know how, because I didn't know how to read the math curriculum and I didn't have the time to do it. This definitely will help that. So as we said, organizing ideas start off each subject. So they say, Alberta Ed says you're starting with the end in mind. These are kind of big picture ideas that kind of encompass the whole subject matter. So there's 8 of them in physical education. You can read them on your screen there. But basically, these are, again, your big picture ideas the kind of key areas that help you kind of wrap your head around like the outcomes and this knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures that you're going to teach within the subject, within each of these areas. We can pop over to guiding questions there, Carrie. Underneath each organizing idea, there's a guiding question. So again, these are kind of like lots of times they'd be referred to as like inquiry questions. They kind of spark interest in the organizing idea within the subject and kind of give you a direction to go within the organizing idea. And then underneath these guiding questions, there are learning outcomes. The learning outcome is what students are required to know, understand, and demonstrate. So typically in the school division, these learning outcomes are what you're actually responsible for assessing on. And this is going to vary from school division to school division, how you're actually reporting on these, but typically these learning outcomes are the piece that are pulled out that you must assess and report. Now, with those learning outcomes, it's important to know for phys ed and wellness from K to 3, there are 10 learning outcomes, and from grade 4, 5, and 6, there's 11 learning outcomes. And a really good way to wrap your head around this is just keep in mind there's 8 organizing ideas. Each organizing idea typically has 1 guiding question and 1 learning outcome, with the exception of movement skill development, which actually has 3 learning outcomes underneath it. So it's quite heavily weighted. And then growth and development adds a 2nd learning outcome when you hit grade 4, when we start teaching human sexuality. That's the complete other outcome. They're all the skills are related to that. Now, underneath the learning outcomes this is like the bulk of the curriculum, where you're going to have the most detail, the most information, the most words. So this is your knowledge, your understanding, your skills and procedures. They're often called cusps. You know, in education, we love acronyms. So if you hear people talking about the cusps and you're like, what are you talking about? This is what they're talking about. This is what a student needs to know, how to apply what they know and how to demonstrate what they know and their understandings. So again, these cusps, I would say, the organizing ideas and the learning outcomes are almost kind of what we want students to know. And that's like the front matter of the curriculum, what we want students to know. And then the cusps are a bit more of a guide for how we want them to know. It also includes a bit of what, like specific knowledge, but it gives you an indication on how to form your lessons, the information you want to be passing on to students. So if you're looking for like specific direction on how to plan a lesson or figure out what content you're responsible for teaching, going to your cusps is a good place to go. So yeah, that's kind of where those are. Important within these cusps is language conventions. So just to keep in mind, Alberta education would argue that the cusps are like completely linked to the outcomes. Like you can't achieve the learning outcome unless you're learning the cusps. So you can't pull them apart. They're that interconnected. So you are required, therefore, to teach the cusps. But it's important to notice that there's certain language, like you can see on your screen here, that indicate what's a requirement and what's a suggestion. So if a cusp ever says that the word including, like in your top example here, include muscular strength, flexibility, cardiorespiratory endurance, that means you must teach those concepts or elements of those concepts. If it uses words, for example, like such as, or for example, and then provides like a list, those are options where you can kind of have some autonomy over the direction you go. So such as home, learning, environment, community, and online. That means you can kind of use some, all, one of those examples to kind of get your learning outcome met. So again, these are like little tiny hints to help you out navigating the new curriculum. Our next slide talks about our progressions. So these progressions are a great jumping off point for cross-curricular teaching and learning. They are considered to be kind of interwoven throughout all subject matter from various parts of the curriculum, various outcomes. These are kind of interwoven throughout. So with the hope that if students are achieving all of the outcomes within the subjects of a specific grade, they're going to be kind of learning these progressions as they go. So in the past, these progressions have been like our Alberta Ed competencies, our 21st century competencies, those types of things like critical thinking, collaboration, personal growth and development. So we're going to highlight these a bit more today, but I think the biggest thing is just to keep in mind that these progressions are kind of a shared responsibility where we're hoping that numeracy, literacy, and competencies are considered by all educators, and they give kind of like a snapshot of where we hope students are at certain ages in their educational career, like big picture ideas, big picture concepts that they should be able to do. We're going to quickly show you how to navigate the website a bit. So again, some of it will be review, some of it might be a little bit of helpful hints and tips. So I'm going to steal screen sharing from Carrie here for a second and share my screen with you. Carrie, can you just confirm that you can see that? Awesome. Yeah, cool. Okay, so starting with Google, I always remind people to type new Learn Alberta instead of just Learn Alberta, because you can still access the old Learn Alberta site, which you don't want to do. So type in new Learn Alberta. It's going to take you here. The first link is the one you want to click. And once you click inside of that new Learn Alberta website, you're going to get to like the launch pad for the new curriculum. Now, when you are in here, one thing that's important to note is this login button in the top right corner. I'm not logged in right now, but you can and should log in using your teacher email, and you're going to get greater access to this website than the public will. So this is like a publicly accessible website, but if you log in and verify that you're an educator, you get more access to the resources that are on the website. So that's a good first step. If you haven't done that already, it's a good thing to do. And then also note that this curriculum implementation information hub has lots of like really helpful videos to kind of wrap your head around why the curriculum was designed the way it was, tips and tricks for navigating it. So if any of this is really helpful, those videos might also be good for you to refer to. Maybe they're not as exciting as Carrie and I are, hopefully, but they are effective. And then if you click into Alberta's K-6 curriculum, this is where you want to go here in your top left corner to actually get into subject matter. Okay, and then you can click on each of the individual subjects. For our purposes, we're going to click into physical education and wellness. And once you're in here, some tricks and tips we like to point out to people. First and foremost, this curriculum is best accessed online. You're going to get way more interactive features and extra detail and information. But if you really do want to print it, this printable curriculum on the left, oddly enough, is not your best bet to click. If you click that, it's going to print all 57 pages of the physical education and wellness curriculum. I believe in math and stuff, it will print the entire curriculum too. So if you only teach certain grades, that's not going to be super helpful for you. Or if you just really want to hone in on the learning outcomes, perhaps this isn't the best bet. So instead, if you click on this printing icon in the top right corner, it's going to give you way more options. You can choose if you want the curriculum printed or the subject introduction, which we'll look at in a second, provide some context to the curriculum, which components of the curriculum you want. So again, if you want to just really narrow it down to your learning outcomes or your cusps, or if you want everything, and then you can actually select off which grades you want to print. So again, this really kind of pares it down, makes it more manageable for you. And then you can generate a PDF and print it that way. So that's a good thing to know. This more info button over here is also really good for you to be aware of. This is the only place where you can really access the subject introduction and like the front matter, the why of the curriculum, I guess you could call it. So clicking into this, it will give you a snapshot. It's quite short compared to past curriculums as far as like the introduction to the subject, but it does give you an idea of why the curriculum was developed the way it is, the importance of health and wellness, what they consider wellness, what they consider physical education, and the importance of these concepts. So really good to be able to read that prior to trying to implement the curriculum. And then once you click into subjects, 2 more little tips that we want to show you. So I'll just click into grade 1 here. This little button on the right here that says collapse all is a handy one for you. If you click collapse all, you're going to be able to just look at the 8 organizing ideas. So when you scroll, you don't have to scroll forever. You can see I've already hit the bottom of my page. And then I can just click into an organizing idea that I want to look at. So if I clicked on active living, for example, it's just going to give me the cusps, the outcomes, guiding questions just for that organizing idea. Okay, but if I expand all of these, click the expand all button, I'm going to be able to scroll for a long time. This is really overwhelming. I found this very overwhelming because it's all the cusps, all the outcomes, everything for the entire subject. Okay, and you're also right now, you can see on my screen, I'm viewing grade 1 and 2. So it's a lot of information. So being able to collapse that is handy for you as well. And then lastly, just one last thing to show you. This is a really important one too for cross-curricular teaching. If you hover over the learning outcome, you're going to see this I appear. It will not appear unless you are hovering directly over it. So lots of people miss this. If you click on that I, it's going to really zoom in on this specific learning outcome. So when you're planning and you really want to teach 1 or 2 learning outcomes, this is very helpful because as you can see, I've now zoomed in on this learning outcome for grade 1 in active living, and I can see all the cusps organized in a nice table. I can actually read them all on one page. I don't have to scroll forever. It's very, very readable. It also highlights resources that you can use. Lots of these are for purchase. Some of them are for free. For example, like our Ever Active Schools one, Go Ever Active. And if you're logged in as a teacher, this locked icon will actually appear unlocked and you'll be able to just immediately download this as a free resource. In this case, not all of them are accessible free resources. Lots of them you have to pay for, but at least it gives you a direction of some resources that can help you achieve this learning outcome. And then thing we're going to dive into a bit more today is you can actually access competency progressions, literacy progressions, and numeracy progressions that connect to this specific learning outcome. So if I was wanting to teach students to investigate the benefits of physical activity, I can also try and tie in students' ability to judge and use the space around them or between bodies, objects, or shapes in the environment. So this is considered a numeracy progression, but obviously this contributes to spatial awareness as well in physical education context. So you can see where there's some overlap, which provides a great jumping off point for active living or for cross-curricular teaching. And as Carrie will show you under these competency progressions, you can also scroll down and there's always personal growth and well-being. This is always one of the competencies that you can view no matter what subject you're looking at, and it blends well to kind of helping integrate some phys ed and wellness content into the classroom if you're teaching in the classroom. So hopefully some of that is new or useful information to you, and I'm going to pass it back to Carrie to share her screen and kind of dive into some cross-curricular content here.
Okay, thanks, Adam. So how are we doing on the call so far? That's a lot of talking at you. I think that's a lot of quick review through the website and undoubtedly some new tips that you've seen Adam share. Are we ready? Feeling good? Any reactions? I tell my team all the time, good wellness tips, silence is not consent. And so, yeah, thumbs up. Thank you, Marilyn. Ready to roll. Um, entry points for cross-curricular teaching and learning. So with that review, that quick review done, and we'll have a chance to look a little bit more deeply at the progressions, because they are a great entry point for cross-curricular teaching and learning. But we also want to think about why you might consider this approach, how to get started, and where to look for ideas. And then we do have a guideline for where you might go to think about combining subject areas, or just to start with. So especially relevant when you're thinking of cross-curricular teaching and learning related to those organizing ideas Adam talked about around active living and movement skill development. These are considered the physical education components of this curriculum. So especially relevant for those, we know that movement and learning are linked. So anytime that you're bringing phys ed components into your other subject areas, these points are helpful. So we know that physical activity enforces emotional or helps to reinforce emotional regulation and self-control. It supports problem solving, memory, attention, and focus. It helps with brain plasticity. That means that it's making the neurons stickier, so they're actually able to connect, and those neural connections and pathways are more easily formed. It supports stress management. I'm betting anyone can relate to that for their own experience, how movement assists with that. It boosts self-esteem and self-worth. And we know also from the research that it can improve overall school performance and attendance. But it's not only when you're doing physical education or formal physical activity within your classroom that movement and learning are linked. It's also what we call NEAT activities, or silly, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. But what it means is just movement, any kind of movement. Anytime your students are out of their desks, they can gain some of the benefits of these research findings. So just to demonstrate this quickly, I'm going to have you stand up if you're able to, and I can't see that you're doing it, but I beg you to participate. So just a quick stand up. And the reason for that is that it's an easy way to show you that within seconds, so only in seconds, your heart rate increases 5 to 8%. That means that you've got more blood oxygen and more glucose flowing to your brain just by that really simple movement. And those are the building blocks for learning. And so thank you for taking that moment to stretch. It feels really good to get up and off my seat. You're welcome to stay standing if you like. As we go on to some of the other reasons to entertain cross-curricular teaching and learning, unrelated to movement specifically, but we know that combining subject areas and learning outcomes in this case helps to make concepts more relevant and stimulating, relating it to the lives of students or your learners. It supports differentiated teaching and learning, so it opens up possibilities for different learning styles and abilities. It increases information retention, mostly because the activities are just more memorable than some more standard or isolated or singular activities that you could choose. It facilitates the connections between information, so the knowledge, understanding, and skills and procedures that Adam was just talking about. It really helps to bring those to life and connected to a student's daily life. And then importantly, it supports work-life balance for teachers. I don't know if Ken's still here and listening, but at the last moment, or at the last session that we did on Tuesday, he shared that by the end of his teaching career, he was basically doing 5 projects across the year, and all of those were cross-curricular, so really rich learning. And think about how much the planning is certainly robust, but it's not treadmill planning, treadmill assignments, where as soon as you send it out, it's coming back. So it does, or it can, once you're practiced at it, support work-life balance for teachers. And lastly, but not least, it's fun. So it really can support more enjoyment, both for you as a teacher, if you, especially work-life balance, again, if you can start to incorporate the things you love to do. So even some of those well-being ideas that you shared in the waterfall activity, if you can start to bring more of yourself and your wellness keepers into your classroom, that's a good thing. So how to get started? We have 3 big tips. The first one is just to set a goal. It can be big or small, and it really should just meet you where you're at. So you know yourselves best, you know your learners best, and it can be as easy as, actually that's not, maybe it's not the starting point, but it could be even 1 class a week. Is that good? If you need to expand that out, is it 1 class every couple of weeks? Can you try 1 lesson in a term or in a semester? Does that work for you in your life? That can be a really simple place to get started, and start with a passion too, something that you care about. The second tip we have is to ask a friend. This may be less structured than you could hope for, so you may not be provided collaboration time within your school day. I'm not sure, I hope some of you are. And I know that preps are short and sweet, and few and far between as well. But if you can look within your school, so into your grade teams, maybe across disciplines, or even within your specialty. So if you're a phys ed teacher, can you look to others in your same field? Or maybe can you partner with the math teacher? Those are all good places to start. And maybe just a thought is that you're very likely already doing planning. And so I know it's easier to do it alone, but it's more fun to do with a friend. And then it helps share the workload as well. The third tip we have is to use the progressions as a starting point. So these are those pieces that Adam was just showing you. And ask yourself, what hints do these literacy, numeracy, and competency progressions provide for us? So I'm just going to jump over here.
Yeah, while you do that, Carrie, I give an example, like just in case you're wondering, how does that look? When I was teaching phys ed for a while, I was starting to I taught it for a few years, so I was starting to look for kind of different activities in my class. And I guess the best way I did that was honestly just asking the grade 2 team. Well, I asked my whole school, but the grade 2 team responded with that they were teaching about the Inuit, or they were learning about, I think, Iqaluit. And I found that out. And then for 2 weeks, we did Inuit games in physical education class, something I'd never done. So it helped me learn more about their social studies curriculum. It helped them take a little bit of pressure off of what they had to teach in their classroom, and really just made it so it was like a bit more of a cross-curricular. Now, again, I wouldn't say it was like super deep, but it was a good entry point for me to start thinking in a more cross-curricular lens.
Thanks, Adam. I'm going to zip through this section because I really want to get to some examples, but I did want to return us over here to the progressions. You can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Just going to return us over here to the progressions. I think I remember somebody's teaching grade 4, so you can hear on the see on the left side of your screen. This is grade 4, and I'm going to use a different learning outcome from what Adam did, just so that we get some variety. But hovering on the eye, maybe that's our top tip. If you come back here, Adam showed you a numeracy progression for physical activity. Again, a great entry point. So you don't need anybody else to start to plan a cross-curricular lesson. You can start here and do it on your own, even without the support of a specialist or another teacher. Again, it's just more fun that way. But I want to point us specifically to these competency progressions and take us down to this personal growth and well-being. This competency is required across all subject areas. So it is a wonderful starting point. It's the hints that are going to start you down the path of cross-curricular teaching and learning. And it's potentially less relevant when you're starting from phys ed and wellness to look at how does this support personal growth and well-being, that competency. But what it does do is point you in the direction when you're looking at a different subject area. Oh, my screen is a bit funny here. So if I close out of that and I come up here to change subjects, let's say math, grade 4. So now I'm looking to get some ideas for how to integrate phys ed and wellness and math. I'm going to Adam's tip, another quick review, just collapse all so that I can start looking at the organizing ideas. I think that patterns might be a good one to think about. And I'm going to look at sequences. Sure, let's see what they have to say. So under this learning outcome for students interpreting and explaining arithmetic and geometric sequences, I'm going to pop into that competency progression and use as a starting point, ooh, not there. Use as a starting point the personal growth and well-being. But I guess this just means it's not a great it's not a great place to start. It's not impossible, but it just
That's
might.
like the first one I've ever seen that doesn't have personal growth and development as part of it.
Sure enough, yeah. All subject areas are required to have personal growth and well-being, but this is actually a great opportunity to highlight that these competencies are curated when you get into this information screen. The competencies are curated specifically to that learning outcome. So there's other opportunities within the math curriculum. It's just not something that they saw in this learning outcome specifically. Yes, Pat, thank you. Great idea. Students can make geometric shapes with bodies. Totally. So it's not that it doesn't exist. It's just that this might not be you might have to do some more thinking, a little bit of creativity there. But if we pop down, let's do this one and see standard units of time. Again, visiting the competency progressions and finding personal growth and well-being. Here's some great starting points for how I can integrate physical activity with this learning outcome in math. So I know this is really quick, but I do want to get to a choose your own adventure activity where we can go through a few ideas. So before we do that, one final rule of thumb, and you're going to see this come up as we start to get into the examples. If you're using outcome-based planning as we are, so what we did was take two outcomes and combine them to give you a grab and go idea and a few extension ideas. So if you're combining two outcomes, you might be looking at a lesson or two. Totally depends on the complexity of those learning outcomes. If you're into grade 5 social, as you'll see, those are really rigorous. And so maybe it's a little bit longer than a lesson or two. So again, it's not a science, it's an art. But if you're combining 3 to 5 outcomes, that might look more like a project, an inquiry project. If you're combining 6 or more outcomes, this is probably closer to a unit in terms of volume of time. Okay, so let's get into it. Pat, I don't want to pick on you, but since you were vocal in the chat, I'm going to see if you would be willing to unmute your mic and serve as my volunteer in this first activity. It's really easy. All you have to do is say stop. So I'm going to click through a series of slides. And when you see one that you want to learn more about, you're going to tell me to stop.
For an art.
For an art. Hold on, where is that? Yeah.
Oh,
there we go. Got it. Thank you. Okay, so let's get into it. In grade 4, just on the left, or sorry, right-hand side of your screen here, you're going to see the learning outcomes we selected. So we just went in there and thought, let's take the art learning outcome on the top and the phys ed learning outcome on the bottom of your screen that you see. What ideas do we have for grab and go? And the first one is just to complete an art project. So plan and complete an art project. And we want to focus on 3 moods. So distinct scenes or moods, and we'll show you an extension for that in a second. The task is to explore how color, texture, light, and perspective can convey mood. And importantly, to take time to discuss how moods relate to feelings. The feelings piece is the entry point to social and emotional regulation. So this is a growth and development outcome from the phys ed and wellness curriculum. And you can spend time as a class or even in self-reflection in identifying and naming feelings. discussing the situations or experiences that trigger changes in how you're feeling, and then practice some self-regulation techniques. If you want to extend that a little bit, you can increase the difficulty by asking students to select the same scene, but then to convey 3 different moods of the same scene. And then you could add music or text to the piece. So the idea I gave last time was, if you're talking through and practicing, discovering some self-regulation techniques that work for your students, and maybe breathing is one that really works for a student, that might be the text that they're adding to their art piece. So it's breathing across the 3 different mood scenes that they're creating. So that's a quick idea. I'll pause here.
This one's scary to point out too. Like, this could also be done during a phys ed class, because it would be easy enough to do this same idea during dance, where their students are trying to convey a narrative, which is an art outcome. So this could be done in art class, incorporating physical education and wellness, or it could be done in phys ed class, incorporating art. So again, like, you can view it from either perspective, right? So regardless of your role.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to know that you've just raised a good point, Adam, to know that in phys ed, what the example you just gave combines movement. So either you could look at movement, skill development, or active living. It combines social emotional regulation, which is under the heading of that growth and development. So if you're a phys ed teacher and you're wondering, how do I bring the wellness component into my class? That's it. And then it also incorporates art. So that's a little bit of a trio. Okay, any comments from our crew? Don't feel pressured, but if you're keen to, you can unmute. Share some first thoughts.
How did you get that choose your own adventure screen? How did you get that matches those 2 areas up?
I made it. So it's just, it's just pulling back the curtain. It's just 4 or how many boxes? 7 boxes. And I highlighted so if I just click this way, I just highlighted the different color. And then I did some fancy linking. So science 3, and then I just linked it over to another slide in my deck.
It's actually 7. It's 7 unique slides, and Carrie just skips back and forth, so it makes it look like it's scrambling.
A rolling the dice effect. Yeah. It's so funny, teachers. This is always like, it's like the PowerPoint tips. I was in a gym last night where, other teachers were taking photos of the signs that they're using. It's so nice to see those, those kind of like soft infrastructure pieces of teaching be shared. Let's do, we have 3 minutes left.
Let's do this one.
Let's do this one. On the right-hand side, you see the learning outcomes that we've combined. The top one is science for grade 3, the bottom one phys ed, and this one is a safety outcome. Actually, this was when I was in the gym. I taught this one last night. So a grab and go, so I know it works. Grab and go activity. Students are working in small groups, and you're going to set up a grid. Oh no, this isn't the one I was thinking of. Yeah, this was not the one I was thinking of, but it was a math one, but this one's great. So working in small groups, you're going to provide each group with the same equipment. It can be as simple or as complex as you want. And that's a way to add extension or variety. You can even add elements like require them to have one simple machine within their game, but you're asking them to create a simple game using the equipment provided. They have to develop clear instructions and provide the safety rules. So that's what it's the step-by-step pieces that's reinforcing computational thinking. So it's priming students for coding actually in the science curriculum, and safety in the phys ed and wellness curriculum. You can make this a little longer, having students take turns to share their games and play their games. Undoubtedly, there will be questions, the what if questions, Adam calls them. And then you can offer the chance for the students to revise their instructions and or safety rules based on how the game played out.
So again, just highlighting something you might already do in phys ed, or something you already might be doing in science, where students are creating things or creating their own game, but now you're kind of hitting multiple outcomes from the same kind of lens. It just takes a little bit of that pre-planning to see how science and physical education and wellness connect.
So we designed these discussion questions for a chance for as a chance for you to sort of process out loud what we just talked about. And we did this through the lens of a learning lead or a specialist. So if you're supporting other teachers to consider or take up cross-curricular teaching and learning within their practice, can you see it working? Why or why not? And what further supports do you think the teachers you're working with might need? But please feel free to apply this to your own experience and your own practice, just depending on the setting that you're in. We are at time, so I think what I'll do is sail through and close us off. I just really want to honor you for the time that you are taking to think about your practice. We really care about the work that you do and happy to support it. But I'll hang around afterwards if you want to ask some questions, and we'll come back to this discussion. Just to let you know, we do have some more upcoming workshops with the Regional Professional Development Consortia, and the next one is coming up in November. We're going to take a deeper dive into the organizing idea of financial literacy. Similarly to this week, we have two kind of lenses for the session, one for educators, and then a similar session for educational learning leaders. So that's November 22nd and 24th. We have another twin session on exploring assessment happening November 29th and December 1st. This is all around phys ed and wellness. You can register on that QR code. Need to plug Shaping the Future. This is the premier health conference in Alberta. So the best part about it, I think there's great content, great learning content, but you will be energized by meeting other people who care about phys ed and well-being in the province. And again, thank you for your time. We love feedback. It makes us better at what we do. So, excuse me, please feel free to scan that QR code and provide us some. You can evaluate the session. And I think we will close off the final, the final words. If there's anything, I think if there's anything you want to chat about, I'll hang around for a little bit, but please feel free to log off. And thanks again for coming.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I just had a question regarding kind of like just the responsibility of the phys ed specialist, and kind of what I'm just learning here or gathering is that the outcomes for phys ed and wellness, skill development, health and wellness, the financial literacy, when it comes to assessing, like doing summative assessments at the end of the terms, is that something like, I'm assuming we'd be collaborating with the classroom teacher on which specific outcomes we're reporting on? Our teachers, like what would be best practice, like to pick different outcomes to report on each semester, or to keep them consistent, to maybe possibly show or communicate growth? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm happy to take this, Carrie, if you can add in, but I would say, like, in a perfect world, collaboration, I think would be best. Like, if you can be reinforcing this in the classroom and in the gym, I would say that's perfect. Like, I used to team teach with all the homeroom teachers as well, so I could deliver a game that covered phys ed outcomes, but also financial literacy outcomes, and then maybe the teacher could extend it in their classroom and assess it there. But that's not always everybody's case. Everybody's context is different. So I would say where you can collaborate on it, the reality is you probably might have to piece out some of those outcomes for assessment and decide like who's assessing which outcomes. And I do think your idea of, while I would say this curriculum, like all these concepts should be revisited a lot and they're a bit more like cyclical as opposed to linear, I think picking one or two outcomes at a time in the phys ed and wellness piece, especially to focus on, is a good idea. Like I would argue, for me, I would choose outcomes related to like healthy relationships and probably safety for September, because I think that sets a really good tone in your class. And it's not that I'm not talking about those all year, but maybe I start with those two in September and then I revisit them in like February when I actually summatively assess them. Because as you know, while it would be perfect if we could summatively assess all of these constantly, that's not realistic. So yeah, I don't know, but
yeah, that was kind of my big question, just as how other phys ed and wellness teachers are communicating summative assessment, if they are picking in their opinion 4 or 5 or 5 key outcomes in one semester, or maybe they're just picking 3 in one semester and then they're focusing on another 3 the following. And then again, are they doing different ones? And it's partly because you broke up when you gave your response. So just tell me, did you say you would use different ones every semester, or would you use the same ones and come back to them? Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, sorry, my audio got chunky there for a sec. I would say, yeah, it's really school by school, but I would say personally, I would probably pick 2 to focus on per month and try and revisit those 2 again at some point later in the year. So if there's 10 outcomes in a year, put 2 per month and do 2 month 1, a different 2 month 2, a different 2 month 3, and then like repeat those 5 themes in the new year where you could summatively assess them. And I'm not saying that's the right way. That would be an idea of how to tackle it though.
I'll just...
And then, has time allocation changed at all, or is it the same?
Unfortunately, it is the same.
Okay.
I mean, unfortunately, it's the same, but actually it's also fortunately no different. So
no, I agree. When I look at it, I do agree as well. Like I can see how it's just a new framework, which is, yeah, exciting.
Yeah, so still, I think it's 10% of instruction. Don't quote me. I think that's between health and phys ed, so it hasn't changed, which is nice to know, because there were some fears that we were going to combine the curriculum and lose like the curricula between health and phys ed and lose time, and we have not. So that's, I think, a blessing. I will just add on to the planning, Jenny. I love your question around assessment. I think Adam's suggestion would be what we're thinking of as best practice, because he's suggested that as a phys ed teacher, you're assessing all outcomes within the phys ed and wellness curriculum. That's probably a newer practice. You were probably used to not assessing the kind of wellness components in the past, or you may not have been responsible for health. It's different everywhere. But I like that as a best practice, thinking about over the year, assessing all 10 outcomes. Another option, and I've heard this a few times, is the homeroom teacher and the phys ed specialist are dividing out the outcomes that they will assess, maybe because they don't have daily phys ed. So the homeroom teacher is responsible for doing some of the more wellness components, the wellness related outcomes of phys ed and wellness. And the phys ed teacher is responsible for more of those active living movement skill development components. So they've sort of decided, we'll do these, I'll do these, you do these, and that's going to span those 10. But I'll just say, even if you're dividing assessment, like especially from the summative space, if you're dividing outcomes for assessment purposes, you're very likely going to want to teach all of the concepts, just not necessarily, just making sure you're sort of dividing the workload around that assessment, depending again on your context and your time with students. So
no, that makes sense. And that really does answer the question, because I was, best practice is to make sure you're reporting on all those outcomes at least once in the year. And that, talking with the homeroom teacher, just kind of saying, okay, well, maybe that growth and development with the puberty, it might be the one you're going to do more in the classroom. And And then with the financial literacy, if I decide to take that one on, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you very much. That was my big question.
Thank you for the question. Thanks for coming, Jenny.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.
Jocelyn, did you have a question as well?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, good night. Thank you.
Good night.
How about you, Pat? Nope, he's gone.
Yeah, I was just listening to that last question, and I was thinking that, you know, like this is kind of new, this curriculum, but we used to do stuff as a school. We used to do things like jump rope for harp. We used to do things like we would do a whole thing where the whole school from K to 9 got involved in different levels and different things there. And we would throw everybody into the gym and we would do activities together, or we would do them in